Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Mitchell Monroy-Valle. I will mention some important aspects of her career. Dr. Monroy is nutritionist and dietitian, graduated from Universidad de San Carlos de Guatemala. She has a master's degree in university teaching with a mention Summa Cum Laude from Universidad del Istmo, and she has a master's degree in public health with emphasis in epidemiology from Universidad Rafael Landívar in Guatemala. She is Ph.D. student in epidemiology at the University of Saskatchewan in Canada. She studied epidemiology at the Harvard School of Public Health and the International Epidemiological Association. Dr. Monroy has a postgraduate degree in food composition data from Wageningen University in the Netherlands, and she has a certification as a specialist in obesity professional education by the World Federation of Obesity, among others. She has taught courses in Guatemala in research and food safety in pregrade and master's program in nutrition. She has several awards for teaching and research merit in her country and internationally. Her research experience is based on public health and social security issues for the Central American Isthmus related to stunting, food insecurity, and family income. Michele, thank you for being with us and presentation your talk titled Bone Health and Body Composition of Children Living in Low Resource Settings. Welcome, Michele, and go ahead with your talk.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Gloria. I am very happy to be here. I got involved with DOHaD Society a couple of years ago, and I got impressed on the quality and of the knowledge that the DOHaD Society shares, and also because it usually goes further, that not just explaining the mother and child malnutrition conundrum. So I am very pleased to be here. I'm very happy and very satisfied to be part of the Latin American DOHaD Society chapter. And thank you for this introduction. And so the title of my presentation will be Bone Health and Body Composition of Children Living in Low Resource Settings. But by now you will be thinking that the title is very ambitious, because we have child's growth information for those settings, but not necessarily we have bone health or body composition information. And let me agree with you. It was a bold idea, and there is not much information about this. And this was precisely the lack of information that encouraged Dr. Hassan Vatamperas, Dr. Jeannie Lane, and me to investigate it. And it became my PhD research project. Today, I will be focusing on low resource settings in Guatemala and the Central American region. And please forgive me if I'm not presenting data from other South American countries. And first of all, Dr. Hassan Vatamperas and Dr. Jeannie Lane, they were very interested in Guatemala, and Dr. Jeannie Lane has a lot of experience doing research in Guatemala, especially in food security. And so these are both my supervisors, and I have learned so much from them. And first, I want to start with an acknowledgement that I am a Guatemalan mestiza, and I recognize my Maya, Xinca, and Garifuna heritage. And I also acknowledge that the land from where I speak today is on the Treaty 6 territory and the homeland of the Métis. I pay my respects for the First Nations and Métis ancestors of this place and reaffirm our relationship with one another. And this is the outline of my presentation. I'm going to present about growth and bone health, vitamin D and infection malnutrition conundrum, and stunting and bone health in children. So to start, I am going to present a review of a lot of studies made in Guatemala by CESIAM and Dr. Noel Solomons and his team. And this is the most information we have from our country. And it's very important because it is timely information that we have, and hoping you can use this information for building public policies for Guatemalan children, and we can do that as well and replicate those research projects in all the Central American region. So first of all, growth depends on bone elongation, and the elongation of long bones is dependent mainly in three factors: availability of the nutrients to build bone tissue, and these nutrients is mostly, there's a lot of nutrients, and we are finding that additional nutrients that we never thought about that, or we never, we didn't do research about that before. They are coming out to be fundamentally for the bone growth. But what we do know is amino acids, calcium, vitamin D, phosphorus, and choline are playing a key role. And the other factor will be that growth depends on a cellular factor, mainly at the bone epiphysis. And this is the expanded end of the long bones. And this factor is, this depends on a process of reactions that I'm gonna try to explain a little bit further, but this is what we learn usually in the anatomy and the physiology classes at university. But it also depends on a hormonal process of signaling the coordination of the process that builds the bones. And so these three factors are key for the bones to grow. And what we are seeing at the beginning of life in Guatemalan babies, so before day 46, it was found that magnesium and selenium deficiencies in breastfed infants could increase inflammation and impair linear bone growth. And that's something, so Guatemala, it is, and I believe you know that Guatemala is the country with the higher prevalence of stunted children in the region. And not any other country is about one, so about 50%, almost 50% of the kids are stunted. The kids less than 5 years old are stunted. But this is a process that we are measuring, and we are doing measurements of children in these 5 years. And we also are measuring now children in the school age years, but we have not done that very, like, as a public health intervention. We are, it's very recent. It's about the last survey, health survey in Guatemala that started measuring babies and weight at birth. And of course, we are finding out, but these studies kept that were before these measurements were keeping, bringing signs that we need to do more. And stunting is not just something that happens when the baby it's out of the womb, but it happens before that, and it happens, it's an intergenerational process. So there was a study that compared rural indigenous to urban mestizas and indigenous Guatemalans. Mother found so the urban population was composed by mestizas and I think it was 30% of indigenous Guatemalans comparing to rurals. It found a high rate of moderate and severe stunting in babies less than 6 weeks of age. So imagine these babies will be stunting. It takes time. Stunting is a process where it is not as immediate as severe acute malnutrition. So mainly these babies were born very small, and when they are out of the womb and they are breastfed and they are cared for, like when they are newborns, the environment is playing a key factor on not letting them grow again as well. And this study also found that maternal DOHaD explains 33% of stunting. And there was a study that was published last year. It was done by the King's College of London, and we were about 200 researchers. We were putting together databases, administrative and survey databases, to see how the population hate was behaving overall in the world. And this study found that Guatemalan women or Guatemalan girls have the less height among the world, and we have a lot of women that are less than 145 centimeters. So it's a very short mom. Guatemalans are shorter, and this is not like, maybe genetics is a part of it, but it's usually the environment, and it's mostly the environment, and it's mostly the food. So these environmental factors that produce oxidative and inflammatory stress, develop hormonal mechanisms for disrupting elongation of the bones in utero, and these are maybe playing a key role in this high prevalence of small babies or children or babies that are already stunted. So usually the higher prevalence of stunting is in indigenous persons and also in rural persons. So it is also connecting to the inequities of the system, the economic and the health system that are in place in the country. And so, as I told you before, I'm going to attempt explaining a little bit about how the bone stops, proliferating and growing. And we have these growth plate zones that you can see in the red. These are capillary bases. So we have these growth plate zones, and so this produces the reserve zone to proliferate, to have the matrix of production, and via mitosis, the cells will proliferate, the bone cells will proliferate and move to maturate in a process and move to maturation and hypertrophy. And then we'll have the calcified matrix and basically the dead cells. But this maturation and hypertrophy is dependent on amino acids, protein, carbohydrates, lipids, minerals and vitamins, vitamin D especially, and all these other nutrients that we are seeing today that they play a key role also. The thing is, so and this, you know, this allows the bone to elongate and to keep the long bones to grow. And malnutrition, and so this mitosis will slow down or even pauses, especially when children have they are in the process of being severe acute malnourished. Usually it almost stops, but not necessarily. It just slows down because growth will continue because it's a priority for the body. The thing is that the cartilage will calcify, leading to stunting, and it will calcify before having more cells to grow. So stunting of the is a process where the epithelial plate is not it's decelerating its process depending on this inflammation that I talked before, and also the nutrients. So the thing is, children that are stunted, their long bones are shorter than children that are not stunted, because that's mainly the idea, right? They are not, their height, we get height because our bone grows. And so children that are stunted are not having all this process of growing bones will decelerate. And also vitamin D will play a key factor in this infection and malnutrition conundrum. And it will have, and it plays a key factor in two vias or two areas. One is bone growth, and the other is protection against infection. So with bone growth, and vitamin D plays a key role in indirect and direct actions on bone formation and resorption that are well documented in literature, and is required for optimal bone growth. And all cells comprising the skeleton contain both vitamin D receptor and the enzyme CYP27BI that is required for production of the active metabolite of vitamin D, 1,25-dihydroxyvitamin D. So is also a hormonal process, as I stated before. But this is the most known role of vitamin D. But recently, and especially now with all the COVID, all the COVID research that is going on now, we are seeing that vitamin D participates in the production of important antimicrobial peptides such as cathepsin. It also has a role in regulating the inflammatory cascade, and has a role in the treatment and or prevention of several infections, including severe acute respiratory syndromes as SARS-CoV or COVID-19. And this research is very recent, and it's part of the research that it's been going on, and has been funding because of COVID. But it also it was a systematic review, so found that vitamin D supplementation in 0 to 95 years old persons was safe, and it protects against acute respiratory tract infections overall. And it was before we had the COVID research going on that this systematic review found this. So patients who were very vitamin D deficient and those not receiving bolus doses experience the most benefit. So it's like iron. When you have sufficient iron, you will absorb what you just need. But when you don't have enough vitamin D, your body will become very efficient on absorbing vitamin D. So this is what so research has found so far. Well, it may be, I'm sure you have more information about this, but this is what I'm presenting today. So, so it makes you wonder, because we live in the Mesoamerican countries, which includes Mexico and the Central American countries, which are located in this part of the world. We are not looking into vitamin D because it is thought that we are mostly vitamin D sufficient, because our body is converting it through the sun exposure. But they found in Guatemalan adolescents that live in the Caribbean part of the country, that nearly more than a half were either insufficient or deficient of vitamin D. And these are adolescents living in the Guatemalan Caribbean. So they will have sun availability the whole day, but it's not necessary. And this goes also with cultural habits like clothing, like adolescents are studying the whole day. So they will be inside a building and not necessarily taking sun exposure. And vitamin D conversion also goes through the latitude also. And even though in the Mesoamerica is supposed to be in a latitude that we can convert vitamin D, we are not, we need to take seriously these cultural habits that we are seeing. And especially in this study, it's telling us, no, we need to supplement, because vitamin D is important, and these adolescents are growing and they need vitamin D. So this study is very important to tell us, and it's specifically for one area of Guatemala that is supposed to be very exposed, or persons are supposed to be very exposed to sun. And so there are other parts, and I think most of the other Central American countries will also have parts that are warm, very warm, and the sun will be there the whole day. But we also have parts where highlands, we have in the sun, we are wearing a sweater the whole day because it's cold. And so this is something that we need to consider. And for me, is that this study is very important, and this study is telling us we need to put that. We need to supplement this population, and we need to do it in a public health intervention, not just this. And we need to do more. Of course, we need to see more studies or to measure vitamin D deficiency in our populations. And this study was from Ecuador. And so this study found that serum 25 hydroxyvitamin D concentrations of less than 42.5 nanomole per liter was the cutoff level for inadequate vitamin status in Ecuadorian, compared 6 to 36 months of all children, compared to the standard that is 50. And these children were modest, underweight, and abundant, and they were stunted. So this study that is suggesting that we should have we should have additional cutoff points for our populations, because the populations are different. We are mestizo, so we have indigenous genes, and we have a whole broad of genes that may be playing a key role. So this study also was important because it shows you the importance to have tailored thresholds for our regions. So we also have pooled data from Mesoamerican families that overall prevalence of serum vitamin D, 25 OH-D concentration less than 50 was relatively low for both adults and children. But the thing is, we need to be more accurate with this. We should be doing more studies, seeing if this is an ideal threshold, and how about we do more biological measurements and we see if this threshold is the adequate for the region. And I'm not saying this is the inadequate threshold, but there's something we need to be thinking of. So the highest concentrations were in Nicaragua, Mexico, and Belize. And the lowest concentrations of vitamin D were in Panama, Guatemala, and the Dominican Republic. So the prevalence of the vitamin D deficiency was higher in adults with more household assets compared with adults in the fewer home assets, because adults, when they, so amount of home assets is an additional measurement we do with food security, when we do measurements of income and food security in our region, because it is, since we rely so much in the remittances, like our economies rely so much on the remittances, mainly from the U.S., that family members working in the U.S. and sending remittances money to our countries, it is very important to measure household assets, because household assets will give you an idea of how the household will manage the income and not just dedicating all to food, like the poorest families do, but also getting assets. And these assets are also important for food security because they're a way of surviving when the family runs out of income or runs out of money, or a disaster strikes, like an economic disaster strikes the family. So this is a very important. And of course, it tells you that when the more assets the family has, the more available money will they have. And sometimes this means that they will work indoors mainly. And those houses that have less assets will work in agriculture. So they will work outdoor. So yeah, sun exposure is very important. But why I am talking about the vitamin D deficiency is that in the region, so the Central American region, and I am saying Central American, but the adequate name is the SICA region. So it's the Central American Integration System. And the Central American Integration System will include Guatemala, Belize, El Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Panama, and the Dominican Republic. And it is very important because I believe that the Andean region in South America works like that. So we will have, for example, for food fortification, we will have homogeneous laws in place, or mandatory fortification in place, because food products will move easily between, and let's say you make a food product, you make maize flour, which is very important. It's a staple in most Central American countries. You make it in a factory in Guatemala, but it also has a sanitary register for the other countries from Guatemala to Panama, because food products will move from one country to another because we have these trading agreements in place. And this is also, and not only food, but people, population from the countries move from one country to another a little bit freely. And we have Guatemala gets a lot of immigrants trying to cross the border to go to the US. So we need to have public policies that are similar. And if for vitamin D, if we are seeing these deficiencies, we need to come up with, we need to come up with similar public health interventions. So what I could find, and it was a very interesting experience, because I couldn't find everything in the internet. So I started talking with some colleagues in other Central American countries. So see how, if there was vitamin D mandatory supplementation in the region. And for example, Guatemala has mandatory household food fortification, and with the micronutrient sprinkles in 6 to 59 months of age. And also last year they started trying to put it in school age children. And the micronutrient sprinkles, among other products, will contain 5 mcgs of cholecalciferol acetate. And so it was the whole dose that it was from the previous recommendation, but Pan American Health Organization and World Health Organization published last year a new RNI recommendations that they are suggesting to increase to 10. So, well, we'll see what happens with that. And so Belize, I couldn't find information from Belize. El Salvador has the same intervention with micronutrient sprinkles for the household food fortification for the child. And so these micronutrient sprinkles are usually for 60 to 90 days. So you will have 3 months, and then the child needs to go to the Ministry of Health to surveillance for weight surveillance or anything. So they will get more if they need more, if they are not growing properly. So it is an intervention in place that has, in Guatemala, I think this intervention was started in 2010. And also El Salvador has the same amount of time doing this. Honduras will have, but I couldn't see, and if there's someone here can correct me if I'm wrong, I couldn't see that it was not regular, and it's dependent on donations. And Nicaragua also is, this intervention is mainly for severely malnourished children, and it's for less than 2 years of age. And so it's also dependent on donations, so it's not regular. And Costa Rica will have, what I could find is that they will use a fortified powder milk that it has 3.3 mcgs of this fortified powder milk will have this. But we also need to know that most of the, like Honduras and Costa Rica, produce most of the dairy products or milk, especially powder milk and UHT milk, packages of milk that is consumed in all Central American countries, and that milk is fortified with vitamin D and vitamin A. So we need to account for the other products as well. And Panama, they also use fortified dairy products that it has less than 1 mcg. And I couldn't find information from Dominican Republic. So we are doing something, and it is something that is important. We are doing something, but we are not measuring vitamin D status in a population base. So there's something we need to consider to do in further research, or in further, we will have maternal and we will have health surveys when COVID allows. We will have health surveys. So so before I told you that the stunting prevalence in Guatemala was the higher in the whole Central American region. And so the darker you see the map, the higher the prevalence is. So Guatemala has a high prevalence, and the measurement in Guatemala, I may not have the last year or the last data. You can check, and this is from the joint estimate from UNICEF, WHO, and World Bank. And they have data from the countries, and I may not have the latest. Sorry about that, and I may not have the latest date of the survey, but Guatemala is very high, and as you can tell, almost half of the children. And El Salvador has been registering to decrease their stunting prevalence in the last years, and since they changed, so they changed the public health system. So stunting is associated with the healthcare, but it also associated with the income and the economic situation of the families. But healthcare will play a key role. So that's one of the things one of the factors that are making this prevalence reduce in El Salvador. And in Costa Rica and Dominican Republic will have the lowest prevalence in the region. And so after Guatemala, the highest prevalence with Honduras, and Nicaragua and Panama are very similar to Belize. So all of them are high. Well, most of them are. We should aim for 0% or less than 5%, but we have long way to go as a region in stunting. And again, it's not the same, but stunting means that the bone didn't grow. So bones are not growing. And we need to look for, it's not just food. You need to look into other factors, such as I mentioned before, this is studies from Dr. Solomons and colleagues from inflammation and other things we need to move forward, just food and not just food fortification, or we need to do more. We need to move further than just this intervention that we have been doing for the last 30 years or 20 years. We need to move more. So I'm going to present some findings of the research we did in Guatemala. I will go. I will present the objectives of one of the primary data collection we did in Guatemala, is to and this is just a little bit of the information we have. We have more information. We hadn't finished the analysis. So today I'm going to present you this part of to explore the associations between stunting and bone growth among Guatemalan preschool children. And I'm also I'm going to present the literature review we did. And our objective was to systematically map and summarize bone health outcomes among children living in low resource settings. And we had this question about what is the bone health status of stunted children living in low resource settings. And also just a note, I'm talking about stunting, and I am interchanging with terms like severe acute malnutrition, and they are linked. They are not isolated things that happen or or outcomes from health happening to the children, they are linked to each other. But I also don't want, and I'm not going to talk about that. We shouldn't forget about malnutrition and the double burden of disease. And we shouldn't forget about obesity as well. But I'm not talking about that part of the data today. And remember, so stunting is related to the second sustainable development goal and to reduce malnutrition. And with COVID-19 pandemic, this is harder now than ever when 250 million people worldwide are at the risk of starvation. And this will affect more the children and will pose higher risk on stunting. So so the results So we conducted a cross-sectional study we collected data from between February and October 2020. And we have 156 participants, 2 to 5 years old of age. And we do it in Chichicastenango, Guatemala, and Central America. And for those who have been in Guatemala, usually most tourists go to Chichicastenango just to check, to see the culture, because it's a very interesting town. We do have this amazing market that is before the colonial times. This market has more than 500 years of it, like 700 years of age, of happening every week. So if you've been in Chichicastenango before, if not, you are welcome to come. We have an amazing team, and we have been working with the Ministry of Health there. And the important thing about Chichicastenango is that 99% of the population is indigenous from an ethnic group called Quiche. So that's why we aim to go to Chichicastenango, because we wanted to see what was happening with indigenous communities in Guatemala. We did a community approach with traditional healers and approval of Ministry of Health ethics. And this community approach, before starting collecting data in February 2020, it took us 2.5 years. And 2 visits from Dr. Lane and Dr. Batan for us to Guatemala and to the community indeed. And yeah, this is why we were able, like when implementing COVID-19 biosecurity requirements, we were able to recruit participants because we were basically, by that time and 2.5 years of community approximation, we were part of the community. And that's how, like, some communities also say they didn't want us to be there, and we respect that, but other communities welcome us into the community. And because our team was mainly, we were nutritionists, and we were working together with the Ministry of Health workers and examine nutrition in the population. We were part of the Ministry of Health team, and that's how we were able to collect data. And all the community leaders assisted us to collect data. They assisted us to recruit participants, to keep physical distance, to keep hygiene measurements. And it was tough because, so the lack of, you've been in a community before, there's not much resources, especially with the places there were some health posts, but usually were community-based areas that were in place to give, to develop the health process or process of the health activities, but also we were embedded in those health activities, daily health activities. That's why we were able to collect data. And so these photos can show you the setting. It was not a perfect clinic, but we were able to put together a place, but was enough to make the machine work. And the machine, so we also measure height, weight, and date of birth, and a lot of other measurements that I'm mentioning today, because those are not the ones that I'm presenting. But we measure bone density with the speed of sound using the quantitative transaxial ultrasound, and thrice from dual side measurement and the left distal radius and mid-shaft tibia in anterior bone. So it was a combination of measurements that we used. And we did other measurements, and Cesium assisted us and trained us to do body composition, but I'm not presenting that part today. And also we received, so we found that, we found what we expected, that 50, like half of the girls were stunted in our population, and 55% of the boys were stunted. And when talking about stunting, it is something that the most biological vulnerability of the boys compared to the girls, that it is documented in literature before, but it's half of our children were of our sample was stunted. The children in our sample was stunted. This gives us a nice comparison that we are going to do further, that we have non-stunted to comparing to stunted, but this is the further data. And what we found on the mean difference in bone density measured with the speed of sound in children with 4 and 5 years old compared to the Mexican peers. So when analyzing bone traits, ethnicity plays a key role. That is why we decided to compare Guatemalan and Mexican children due to their ethnic similarities. The bone sonometer that you saw on the pictures provides 2 measurements, one from in the arm, in the distal radius, and one from the leg at the mid-shaft tibia. So the numbers that you see here in red represent the age group that has significantly lower bone density than their Mexican peers. So this is their bone density will be this, and this is the mean difference. And most of them have from 2 to 4 years. They have in the girls will have lower bone density, and the boys to 3 to 5 years. So comparing to Guatemalan children with the Mexican peers, we found significant difference in the boys' radius density, but only in 2 years old girls. The tibial bone density was significantly lower in 5-year Guatemalan girls compared to their Mexican peers, but overall there were no difference in the tibial bone density between boys and girls. And of course, this data we will do further analysis on this data, but sorry. So child growth is internationally recognized as an important population indicator to malnutrition status. And children from Guatemala study have very high prevalence of growth retardation compared to WHO standard. And this is a significant public health problem, and I cannot address the importance enough of doing something about this. So greater difference in bone density between Guatemalan boys and Mexican peers compared to girls. And compared to the Mexican children, younger boys, 2 to 3 years old, have lower bone density, while older boys, 4 to 5 years, have higher density. So the sex difference in bone density in Guatemalan and Mexican children, this regarding the high prevalence of growth retardations, this all warrants for further investigation. So I think we know a little bit more of this population, but I think we know less, and we need to know, like, we need to do further research about it. And so that's why we also conducted a scope review, to know what was happening all over the world, not just our data compared to the Mexican data, which was the most proximate data we have in that measurement. And so we included this, we included studies involving children that had not reached puberty. So this is boys younger than 13 and girls younger than 11. And these studies that we included, it should report at least one quantitative measure of bone health or height, such as bone mineral density, bone mineral content, speed of sound, or T-score, bone formation, or resorption markers, fractures, introductory bone measurements, and body and height length. And we ended up checking 1,441 references, and included 20 studies. And so we did screen a little bit more than 1,000 studies, and find that mostly were not relevant. And it's not that we don't have enough we don't have information of bone measurement in children. It's that we don't have much information of bone health in low resource setting. That was our aim. So so we did compare this from age 6 to 10, and because I show you there was not much information for children less than 6 years of age. That's why we do have information, but it was not enough, and we didn't have for all bone measurements. So I'm presenting you just the one that we have. We ended up finding a little bit more complete information, and from ages 6 to 10, TBVMC, which is total bone mineral content, and total bone mineral density, TBMD, was significantly higher among boys and girls living in low resource settings compared to the high resource settings counterpart. So you can see this is the high resource settings and this is the low resource settings. And so the thing is, we start life with lower bone density, and as they age, they get higher bone density. And we do have, and I know that the presentation speak about body composition, and we don't have much more. I haven't presented enough information for body composition, but we also do, like, we did this research, like the literature review. We found that children in low resource settings generally had lower mean lean mass and fat mass than children in high resource settings. However, children aged 6, you can see here, children aged 6 to 8 years living in low resource settings had a higher mean less mass than their peers living in high resource settings. So I cannot tell you why, but I think this deserves further investigation. And to end my presentation, so available evidence is suggesting that children in low resource settings follow a different growth pattern compared to children in high resource settings. And this is our interpretation of the evidence. It can be different from yours, but their growth pattern is characterized by being born shorter, and they experience accelerated linear growth between 2 to 5 years of age. Of course, if condition allows, but also it's documented that when children had severe acute malnourishment periods, they will have this accelerated linear growth when after recovering, just in the moment after recovering. And they have higher bone mineralization between the age of 6 to 10, accompanied by higher muscle growth between the ages of 6 to 8 years, compared with the high resource settings counterparts. And of course, we are seeing a sex difference in bone density in Guatemalan and children from the study we did in the fieldwork. But disregarding the high prevalence of growth retardation, this sex difference warrants further investigation. So, Malteo Chawé, thank you and gracias.
Thank you, Michelle.
Por favor, Gloria.
Thank you. Now we move to the question section. Anyone have a question for Dr. Monroy, please? I have a couple of questions, Michelle. Bueno, te las voy a hacer en español. Tenemos ya la forma de, bueno, tenemos abierta la parte de la sección de preguntas para hablar en español. Entonces te voy a hacer un par de preguntas. Me parece muy interesante el trabajo. En México nosotros hemos explorado un poco micronutrientes que creemos que están relacionados con el crecimiento y desarrollo fetal. Entonces hemos evaluado el contenido de vitamina D en el suero materno y bueno, no hemos visto, no hacemos un seguimiento de los recién nacidos, pero me parecen muy interesantes los hallazgos de que, bueno, pues la vitamina D está asociada con justo el crecimiento óseo, y esto está relacionado con la estatura de los niños, y adicional a un antecedente que nos presentaste de que tanto magnesio como selenio, si mal no recuerdo, sí, deficiencias de estos micronutrientes al seno materno, pues también pueden afectar el desarrollo del hueso. Y entonces mi pregunta va hacia como nos estamos enfocando un poquito hacia lo nutricional en nuestra línea de investigación, mi pregunta va en ese sentido. Si ustedes han visto en la población que han estudiado algunos micronutrientes que se asocien con justo estos problemas en el crecimiento de los huesos largos, ya sea del radio o algunos otros.
Gracias, Gloria. Qué interesante lo que ustedes están haciendo. Entiendo que tú trabajas con células madre también, ¿verdad? Con la placenta.
Con la placenta, sí.
Ajá. Nosotros, nuestro estudio es de niños de 2 a 5 años. Y entonces nosotros ahorita estamos en esta parte de analizar la dieta. Sí recolectamos datos, pero es muy reciente. En realidad terminamos de limpiar datos como en abril todavía, ¿verdad? Todavía por el COVID nos costó mucho terminar de limpiar la data, de haber data faltante. Entonces, nosotros estamos viendo dieta principalmente. Todos estos estudios de etapa temprana los hace Ceciam y el doctor Solomos, que creo que lo vi por aquí entre los participantes. Sí. Y sería muy bueno que él presentara toda la experiencia que ha tenido con esto, ¿verdad? Pero sí, definitivamente nosotros estamos, toda la parte de lo de nutrición, lo estamos viendo por dieta, y nosotros también medimos vitamina D en sangre de los niños, pero realmente es muy similar al estudio que presenté de los estudios de Mesoamérica, que tenían that pool data, que nosotros no encontramos mucha deficiencia, pero también habría que analizar si nuestros cortes son los adecuados, ¿verdad?
Claro. Muy bien. Bueno, tenemos otras preguntas. La participación de Cristian.
Sí. Michelle, Muchísimas gracias por esta súper presentación, que súper revisión que hiciste de vitamina D, realmente muy, muy interesante. Y hablaste mucho de la parte de la inmunidad. Es algo que yo no conocía a tiempos atrás y empecé a estudiar un poco sobre esta cuestión de vitamina D y inmunidad. En tus estudios, ¿pretendes hacer algo como evaluar la inmunidad también de los niños? Yo no sé exactamente si la vitamina D está más relacionada con la inmunidad innata o con la inmunidad adquirida, no sé si es así que se habla también en español, pero innate and acquired. Y no sé si tienes algún plan de hacer algún tipo de evaluación de estas con los niños.
Sí, nosotros recolectamos data de enfermedades en los 15 días antes de la revisión, y sí tenemos historia de enfermedades. Entonces sí tenemos la data y sí tenemos planeado hacer el análisis, pero no hemos terminado. Es muchísima data la que recolectamos. Las mamás fueron maravillosas invirtiéndonos tanto tiempo, realmente era un cuestionario casi de 1 hora. Entonces sí tenemos planes de esto. Y lo de inmunidad innata o adquirida, yo creo que hay de las dos, porque también pues los estudios de CESIAM hablan de breastfeeding infants y de la lactancia, ¿verdad? De la vitamina D en la lactancia y el rol de la inflamación. Entonces, pero no te sabría decir claramente esto.
Muchas gracias.
Tenemos otra participación, la doctora Paola Casanello. Adelante con sus comentarios para la doctora Michele, por favor.
Muy buenas noches, gracias Michelle. No sé si se escucha.
Sí, doctora, gracias. Sí.
Gracias por la presentación, súper interesante estudiar poblaciones que están realmente en un extremo del foco de la deprivación en el fondo de nutrientes macro y micronutrientes. No recuerdo haber escuchado, a pesar de que estuve bien pendiente, no recuerdo haber escuchado en relación a calcio. ¿Ustedes están midiendo niveles de calcio en el plasma o algún otro indicador de los niveles de calcio en la orina, en algún otro lugar? Primero. Y también me interesó, igual que Cristiana me pasó lo mismo, estos niños normalmente tienen hartas infecciones, diarreas y cuadros en el fondo infecciosos de todo tipo. Entonces me interesó también conocer qué pasaba con la inmunidad, ya lo contaste, pero seguido de eso también es muy interesante la microbiota, porque eso te puede dar un montón de información de la interacción del sistema inmune con el sistema digestivo. Entonces de pronto pudieras tener algo de información, y eso es información relativamente fácil de recolectar. Las deposiciones son cosas que no son invasivas y que se pueden almacenar de forma, bueno, hay que almacenar en nitrógeno líquido, eso es complicado de pronto en el setting rural, digamos, pero sería de tremenda relevancia si pudieras tener acceso a esas muestras.
Gracias por su pregunta, doctora. No, de calcio no medimos porque pues también habían limitado recursos, ¿verdad? Entonces calcio no medimos, pero nosotros no medimos microbiota necesariamente, pero sí hicimos medición de parásitos en heces. Hubiéramos querido almacenar, pero no hay dónde, o sea, no hay dónde en Guatemala. Pero nosotros sí tenemos data digamos, microorganismos, tenemos data de algunas, las que se ven macroscópicamente. Sí tenemos registrado para niño y madre. Entonces lo importante es que nosotros tenemos datos de niño y de madre, aunque no sea madre inmediata, o sea, los niños son más grandes, pero sí tenemos una historia de lo que está pasando con la madre y con el niño. Y sí, o sea, es limitado los recursos que, digamos, no solo el recurso para hacer la investigación, sino que de hecho nosotros tuvimos que cambiar nuestra forma de recolectar vitamina D, tuvimos que volver a aplicar a ética para esto, porque con COVID no podíamos mandar muestras a ningún lado, sino que todo se tenía que procesar a nivel nacional. Entonces, eso limita muchísimo porque pues los laboratorios no están a punto, pues ustedes ya saben todo lo que se necesita para tener esta información. Pero no, solo sí tenemos muestras de heces. Es en una submuestra, la vitamina D heces y hemoglobina, digamos todo el perfil de hematología completa, hicimos en una submuestra de 31 madres y sus niños, por la cuestión de recursos principalmente. Pero la verdad es que cuando yo estaba ahí dije que bueno, porque es muy complicado recolectar heces en poblaciones indígenas. Es muy, muy complicado porque esto lleva un poco a la privacidad. Entonces, en poblaciones indígenas es complicado. Sin embargo, lo logramos, ¿verdad? Pero la verdad es una población, no les voy a decir que cautiva, pero es una población que ya tiene confianza en nosotros. Las mamis nos escriben para ver cómo estamos, nos saludan, nos mandan fotos. La semana pasada todavía me mandaron una foto de una mami que le ayudamos a poner un huerto, que no era parte de nuestra investigación, pero ni siquiera la ayudamos económicamente, sino que conseguimos a alguien que la asesorara en el tema. Y pues me mandó fotos de sus huicoyes. O sea, tenemos una población que va a seguir trabajando con nosotros en el caso que pudiéramos seguir haciendo investigación con ellos, ¿verdad? Y esos, tenemos ya 4 años de relación con la población, entonces eso es muy difícil conseguirlo en Guatemala, sobre todo en poblaciones netamente indígenas, ¿verdad? Pero pues bienvenida, doctora, a integrarse con nosotros para ver si podemos hacer más cosas.
Muchas gracias por tu respuesta, excelente. Me da un gusto escuchar. No sé si alguno de ustedes vieron en las redes sociales el Paulo Nepomansky de la Universidad de Fraser en Canadá también. Hizo una presentación en el Congreso de Antropólogos en Argentina y presentó al final datos de unos financiamientos que tienen justamente para trabajar con poblaciones indígenas de Canadá, sin embargo. Pero planteó una forma de mirar este tipo de trabajos, trabajos con pueblos originarios, que en el fondo el director del proyecto no es el investigador, sino que es alguien representante del pueblo originario. Me pareció tan respetuoso, tan bien planteado. No sé si es algo que tú también has escuchado o que de alguna forma se está promoviendo desde Canadá, pero me pareció una experiencia notable realmente.
Sí, nosotros lo tratamos de hacer y estamos en el proceso de hacerlo. El hecho de que no lográramos conseguir a alguien con un nivel técnico, digamos, técnico académico occidental, que nos permitiera entrar a los comités de ética, ¿verdad? Nos costó. De hecho, logramos otra forma y es hacer la aprobación de los sanadores tradicionales. Entonces tenemos una sanadora tradicional trabajando todo el tiempo con nosotros en la recolección y es parte del equipo, ¿verdad? Lo cual nos enseñó muchísimo a cómo trabajar en la comunidad. Y ella también conoció otras comunidades que tal vez no necesariamente conocía. Entonces fue un intercambio muy bonito. Y básicamente toda la forma en que recolectamos los datos, los días que llegábamos, todos se los dejábamos a ellos que nos lo dijeran. Y fuimos muy respetuosos. Y eso es otro tema, que al ser respetuosos de las comunidades indígenas, uno planea la recolección de datos para cierto tiempo y el tiempo a veces se hace 3 veces lo que uno había planeado. Y eso hay que contemplarlo cuando se trabaja con comunidades indígenas.
Gloria, se me permite solo una palabrita, que eso que Paola y Michelle estaban hablando ahora realmente es muy interesante, cómo en Canadá se demuestra ese respeto que hay por los primeros pueblos, ¿no? Nosotros de Latinoamérica tenemos tanto en común con Canadá en ese sentido, y me llamó mucho la atención cómo empezaste tu presentación, y todas las presentaciones que yo vi cuando estaba en Canadá, en los meetings y los congresos también eran así. Entonces te felicito también por todo este respeto que mostraste desde el principio de tu presentación.
Gracias, Cristian, por los comentarios. Y sí, definitivamente este tipo de trabajos son muy complicados hacer en comunidades indígenas, y siempre hay que acercarse, como bien lo decías, a los líderes comunitarios para poder hacer este tipo de trabajos. Y bueno, pues aún así hay complicaciones, ¿no? Entonces, pero bueno, muy lindo el trabajo. Le pediría por favor al doctor Marcus Páez si nos da el cierre de nuestra sesión y bueno, la invitación a nuestros siguientes eventos.
Bueno, muchas gracias Gloria, muchas gracias Michelle por tu presentación, una gran presentación, muy bueno oírte y saber lo que pasa y lo que estás ahí a investigar particularmente con los pueblos indígenas de de Guatemala, ¿sí? Entonces, acá agradecemos a todos ustedes que acá estuvieron con nosotros esta tarde y les recordamos que la próxima semana tenemos nuestras próximas webinarios. La próxima semana el doctor Peter Nathaniels con nuestra charla anual que va a presentar. En la semana siguiente tendremos al doctor César Víctora en el DOHaD webinar juntamente con la Sociedad DOHaD Internacional, y aún en noviembre tendremos la presentación del doctor Pablo Durán de Uruguay, que nos va a hablar entonces desde el Centro Latinoamericano de Perinatología. Sí, entonces muchas gracias a todos ustedes que aún están acá con nosotros. Les invito entonces a, se pueden abrir sus cámaras para sacarnos una foto de este, como un recuerdo de esta presentación, y bien, y saludarlo y verlos todos. Muchas gracias por estar con nosotros. Muchas gracias. Buenísimo. Acá estamos. Entonces vamos a sacar una fotita. Muy bien, muy bien. Gracias, amigos, que estén todos bien y hasta la próxima semana con la charla del profesor Peter Nathaniels. Un abrazo a todos.
Muchas gracias.
Gracias por la invitación. Gracias.
Hasta luego. Michelle, muchísimas gracias por tu presentación, por todo.
Gracias a ustedes. Nos vemos, doctor Solomons.
Muy bien. Un abrazo,
Gracias,
Elena. Un abrazo
Elena, por estar.
Elena, qué bueno verla.
Qué bueno verles. Adiós.
Buenísimo. Fue una buena charla. Un abrazo, Gloria. Un abrazo, Bernardo. Chao.
Un abrazo, cuídense.
Abrazo.